Started early. So, good afternoon, and thank you for coming here today. My name is Evan Weiner, and on Monday it is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. His birthday, a woman told me the other day, you just made me feel old, because Elvis is in this talk. He was 90 years old on January 8th. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was 96. So the other day, January 15th, a woman said to me, "You're making me feel old," because I remember them as young people. And you remember this car.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask anything else
That was
about
it.
that car. Dr. Jonas Salk, the polio vaccine comes out in 1955. Emmett Till is killed. That is the beginning of the civil rights movement. And Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on the Montgomery bus, and that is the introduction of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to American society as he now becomes a prominent figure in the civil rights movement. Diem takes over from in South Vietnam. The Warsaw Pact, the Soviets are upset that West Germany has joined NATO, and so they decide we're going to have all of our countries together. The Warsaw Pact. The Baghdad Pact, Middle East, that's Iran is involved in Iraq, who both were United States allies at that time, along with England and Pakistan. Disneyland opens. Now, I don't know how well you can see this picture. This does not, if you look up closely, does not look like Mickey. That does not look like Minnie. They look like they're wearing grotesque Halloween masks. However, Disneyland opened in 1955. I hear Elvis in the background there. A little late, that's 56. We're doing 55. And there's the Mickey Mouse Club. How many of you watched the Mickey Mouse Club back in the day? Yeah. MICKEY-MOUSC. And McDonald's opens in Plain, Illinois on April the 15th. Elvis, speaking of Elvis, he signs a contract with RCA Records. And how many Brooklyn Dodger fans? Oh, you're applauding. Next year finally game.
What did you say?
Brooklyn Dodger fans. Next year finally came. The Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team finally won a World Series. It would end up being the only World Series. The Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team.
And then they moved away.
Then they're gone. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. And the golden age of radio is over. Jack Benny program ends in 1955 on radio. And the transistor radio makes its debut. How many of you had a transistor radio, and how many of you had it where your parents couldn't hear it? So you could listen to Elvis, among others. Einstein dies, and we start with Dr. Jonas Salk. He's not a Facebook expert on polio. He's not a social media expert on polio. He is the real deal. And I wonder, we're talking about vaccines today and the possible next head of human health services in the United States. I guarantee you he got vaccinated by his father, Robert Kennedy. I guarantee you that. But anyway, this guy is a real expert on the disease. In 1947, Dr. Jonas Salk was appointed the director of the Virus Research Laboratory, the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine.
I was around when they were doing.
The polio pioneers.
Salk.
Yeah, were you a
experiments?
Were you a polio?
Teacher.
Yeah. Oh, you were a teacher. You were a teacher in those days. Anyway, I'll get back to that in a minute. Anyway, it was with funding from the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, now known as the March of Dimes. Do you know who came up with the term March of Dimes?
No.
Eddie Cantor.
Really?
Eddie Cantor raised a lot of money for that. Make him whoopee. If you knew Susie like I knew Susie, well, I better not get into that.
I've heard him on the radio.
Eddie Cantor, yeah. Salk began the techniques that would lead to the vaccine that would wipe out the scourge that was worrying parents and people like my sister-in-law, who was afraid to go to sleep at night because she thought she'd wake up with polio the next day. Polio. Anyway, so why are we not moving here? Here we go. This is an iron lung, and the last survivor of the iron lung just recently passed away. And he got out during the day, but he had to sleep in the iron lung. And this kid is pretty brave, and he has a big smile on his face, as you can see. But polio victims did end up in iron lungs. And I'll talk a little bit about what the iron lung is doing today in a minute. Contrary to the era's prevailing scientific opinion, Dr. Salk believed that his virus, composed of killed polio virus, could immunize without risk of infecting a patient. And he was so sure of it himself, he took the shot himself. He had his wife take the shot, had his kids take the shot. He had some volunteers to take the shot. And everybody developed anti-polio antibodies, no negative reactions. It is ready to go. And the other day I was giving this talk, and somebody told me they were a polio pioneer in 1954. They got the placebo. They didn't know if they got the real thing or the placebo. They were told eventually they got the placebo so they could get the shot. And this is the New York Journal American. Remember the New York Journal American, which ended up becoming the World Journal Tribune and then out of business. And 7 cents back in 1955. But there he is, Dr. Salk. In 1954, national testing on 1 million children between the ages of 6 and 9 began. They were known as the polio pioneers. On April 12, 1955, the results were announced. The vaccine was safe and effective. In the 2 years prior to the vaccine becoming widely available, the average number of polio cases in the United States was 45,000 per year. 7 years later, it was 910 polio cases. And this was no scheme to get rich or get rich quickly or overnight. You know, if you remember when the COVID vaccines came out about 5 years ago, and people were talking about monetarizing. We got to make money. We got to make money from Wall Street for this. Well, he decided, you know what? This is for mankind. This is for humankind, for womankind. I don't want to make money off of this. Just what they paid me. He never patented the vaccine or earned any money from his discovery, preferring it to be distributed as widely as possible. He goes on, see it now on CBS with Edward R. Murrow. In fact, Edward R. Murrow's partner, Fred Friendly, his wife, Ruth, who's about 95 years old now, lives in Riverdale, and until COVID, she was teaching journalism at Columbia University, and told me a lot of stories about it. Anyway, so Murrow interviewed Salk, and he said, well, what is it? Why don't you want to make any money off of this? And there was Franklin Roosevelt, who helped kickstart the March of Dimes. Salk said, well, the people, I would say, because there were a lot of donations, lots of donations, millions of dollars worth of donations, raised by the March of Dimes for the research and field testing. Salk said, there's no patent. Could you patent the sun? Lawyers for the foundation had investigated the possibility of patenting the vaccine, and Salk said, no, don't do it, don't do it, and they dropped it. So Salk not only came up with the vaccine, they wanted to make sure everybody got the vaccine. But of course, you know, you do have your naysayers, and he would be a Facebook expert today, or maybe a Twitter expert, or a TikTok expert. TikTok might not be in business as of Sunday, because the Supreme Court said...
What was his claim to fame?
He had no claim to fame.
He was a newspaper.
He was a failed actor who somehow got a job as a newspaper columnist, and he did Hello, Mr. and Mrs. America, and All the Ships at Sea, and this is Walter Winchell, and no relation to Paul Winchell, by the way, the ventriloquist. Each had their separate problems, but he was a failed actor, and they just hired him. I mean, it's like Heather Hopper and Llewellyn Parsons. They had no real particular use, other than they had names and they majored in gossip. Anyway, the influential, I don't know why he was influential. I'm a journalist, and I never saw it, but he was. In those days, he has no scientific credentials, and he warned that Dr. Salk's shot was a killer. Authorities, which he'll claim wrongly, were stockpiling stockpiling little white coffins, handling the vaccine's victims. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, on its editorial page, took Salk's side, said that Winchell, and they were right, Winchell was distinguished for a long career of washroom gossip, self-glorification, and journalistic vendettas of the basest sort. Had a feud with Ed Sullivan. He's the one who exposed Lucille Ball voting communist in 1936 and during the Red Scare, among other things. That's what he did. And the vaccine worked. Maybe not for that moment for that kid, but he probably was better off getting the vaccine. My wife has a cousin who's about 75, 76 years old now, and he asked me, well, what are you working on? Because I'm always working on something. And we're talking about the 1955 time, and I was talking about the polio vaccine. And his parents left the Bronx, went right across the river to the closest town they could, Paramus. And he's living in Paramus, Teaneck at the time. And he said that, I don't know what grade he was in, but they brought the kids into the school in Paramus or Teaneck, and they lined them up in the auditorium, or they sat them in the auditorium, and one by one, they went up to the stage and they got inoculated. He said that's how he got his shot. Now, I'm a little younger than he is. I got my shot in a doctor's office, but they were giving the shots at school. And this, as you can see, is at school. United Press Wire Service article that ran in newspapers across the country on April 13th reported hundreds of doctors and registered nurses stood ready to begin the stupendous task of inoculating millions of children throughout the country. But there were the naysayers, there were the protesters, and of course Winchell was prominent on radio. Some hitches developed, however. In Montgomery County, that's outside of Washington, 4,000 parents in Maryland flatly refused to let their youngsters receive the vaccine. I had a woman the other day saying that she taught here in somewhere in New York City, and in order for kids to say no to the vaccine, the parents wrapped ace bandages around both their arms, which signified we're not giving the shot to anybody. And 2 counties in Indiana objected that the plan smacked of socialized medicine. They're giving it out for nothing. It's socialized medicine. Well, you know. Anyway, but there was a disaster. So Winchell was partially right. There was a disaster. One of the 6 labs manufacturing the vaccine, the Cutter Laboratories in Berkeley, California, made a terrible mistake. The correct list of ingredients of the vaccine called for the polio virus to be inactivated. But in the Cutter facility, the process of killing the virus proved defective, and it caused a massive problem. The batches of the company's vaccine did go out. 200,000 were, well, I don't know if they were kids or adults, but 200,000 people, they say children here, received the vaccine. 40,000 got polio from it. 200 were left with varying degrees of paralysis, and 10 died. Remember Bill Cullen from The Price is Right and other game shows? I've got, he was on To Tell the Truth. No, he was on I Got a Secret. He had polio. Dinah Shore had polio. They both walked with limps. Polio vaccines were temporarily halted in following the Cutter error as well. After Cutter's manufacturing error was pinpointed as the problem, the vaccines were started within a few weeks, and there was renewed quality control, and Cutter was cut out. They were gone. That's an iron lung. My daughter lives in Seattle, and not far from the Gates Foundation, and you walk down the hill from where she lives with my granddaughter and son-in-law. You go into the Gates Foundation, and this is the first thing you see, an iron lung. People don't know what an iron lung is anymore. They don't know. You know, it was used for polio victims. And they basically say, and Bill Gates is going to be 70 years old this year, take your shots. Take all your shots. Don't listen to these pseudo-experts. Listen to the experts. Listen to the medical profession. Take your shots. Get the vaccine. Some mothers and fathers jump right back in following the Cutter tragedy, once again signing the permission slips and lining their kids up to get a polio shot. But African Americans had problems with the government. They didn't trust the government. The Tuskegee Institute experiment, other things. And the March of Dimes, they knew that to appeal to the African American community, they had to roll out the big stars and hope that they could sell to the African community the value of taking the shots. That's Ella Fitzgerald. She sold the vaccine. There she is in front of the March of Dimes logo. Vaccine efforts at the time faced racism in the Jim Crow South. Well, the white kids could go inside, like my wife's cousin who got the shot over in New Jersey, but the black kids couldn't go inside the white schools, couldn't get shots in the white schools. They could get it on the lawns of the white schools, but they were not allowed inside the schools. So the white children got their shots inside, they got their shots outside the building, and the March of Dimes knew that they had to appeal to the African American community, and they got people like Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Sammy Davis Jr. Go out there, get your shot, get your shot. By the way, teenagers were not taking the shots. That would change in 1956 when a guy named Elvis took a shot before the Ed Sullivan Show. All of a sudden, the shot rate skyrocketed after Elvis took the shot. The murder of Emmett Till, and this is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King weekend. He has nothing to do with the murder of Emmett Till. This is a separate entity, but 1955 is a milestone year in the civil rights movement. Emmett Till was born in Chicago. He grew up in a middle-class black neighborhood. He was visiting relatives in Money, Mississippi, when the 14-year-old was accused of whistling at Carolyn Bryant, a white woman who was a cashier at the grocery store, local grocery store. Till was killed on August 28th. On August 24th, Carolyn Bryant, the woman behind the counter, later claimed that Till grabbed her, made lewd advances, and wolf whistled at her as he sauntered out. Well, there were no witnesses to it. Absolutely no witnesses to it. It was her word. That was it. And that's her husband, Ron Bryant, and that's his half-brother, J.W. Millam, so I guess he was the half-brother-in-law. And they are accused of the murder, and this is what they did. They abducted Till from the home of his great-uncle, Mose Wright, where Emmett was staying, and then made Emmett carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan to the bank of the Tallahatchie River and ordered him to take off his clothes. The two men then beat him nearly to death, gouged out his eyes, shot him in the head, and threw his body tied to the cotton gin with barbed wire into the river, thinking, well, you know what? Nobody's ever going to find the body again. Their plan goes awry. The body washes up. The corpse was recovered, but it was so disfigured that Mose Wright, his great-uncle, could only identify it by an initial ring. Now, Mississippi is one of the worst places in the South for Jim Crow. Absolutely one of the worst places. I had a friend, a guy by the name of Fred, who worked at United Press between 1958 and 1962 in the South. And he was the bureau chief in charge of the civil rights coverage. And he told me, he said, everybody knew what was going on. He said, all the white people knew. It was gossip. Everybody knew what was going on. The black community knew what was going on. More importantly, the police knew what was going on and turned the other way. Some of the policemen were part of the KKK, and that's the other part of what was going on in the South. Anyway, so they want to get rid of the body. They want to get rid of the evidence. That's it. We're washing our hands of it. But Till's mother, Mamie Bradley Till, said, I want the body back. Send the body back. And we're having an open casket funeral in Chicago, and we want all of the media to be there to take pictures, and they took pictures. This is Jet Magazine. And it says, Negroes often lynched for crimes of guilty whites. And that is Mamie Till, his mother, with Emmett Till, the late Emmett Till. September 19th, in Mississippi, Negroes and women were barred from serving jury duty. Bryant and Millam were tried before an all-male, all-white jury. Moses Wright took the stand, identified Bryant and Millam as Till's kidnappers and killers. Despite overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt and widespread pleas for justice outside of Mississippi, on September 23rd, the panel of white male jurors acquitted Bryant and Millam of all charges. The deliberations lasted 67 minutes. These guys got away with murder. These guys absolutely got away with murder, but they make a mistake. Talk about it. For the first time, the truth about the Emmett Till killing. Now, I'm a journalist, and I don't believe in paying anybody money for their story. But Look Magazine had no problems paying these two guys to get the story about the killing of Emmett Till. It's January 1956. Roy Bryant, the husband of Till's accuser, Carolyn Bryant, and his half-brother, J.W. Millam, admitted to committing the murder of Till. They were protected, not guilty. No such thing as double jeopardy. Didn't have to face the law again. They told the whole story of how they kidnapped Till to Look Magazine. They got $4,000 to split. Today it'd be $46,000. The article would destroy Bryant and Millam's lives, but they got away with murder. Why did it destroy their lives? They talked. Normally after lynchings, guys didn't talk, but these guys did. They lost their businesses, no longer accepted by their community, boasted of the murder. Bryant was also a wife beater, and eventually Carolyn Bryant got rid of him because he was also a wife beater. So where is President Eisenhower, and where's J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI? Well, apparently nowhere to be found. The Till family wanted answers from the federal government. President Eisenhower and the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover ruled out a federal investigation. President Eisenhower didn't even answer Mamie Till's telegram asking what's going on. J. Edgar Hoover wrote in the memo, "There's no allegation made that the victim has been subjected to the deprivation of any right or privilege, which is secured and protected by the Constitution and the laws of the United States." In other words, this wasn't a hate crime, it's a local crime, and that's it. We're not going to talk about it. Goodbye, so long, farewell. We're closing the door. Till murder is a keystone to the start of the civil rights movement. Now, that's Rosa Parks. And Rosa Parks was a 42-year-old woman who was just tired all over and just wanted to take the bus to get back home back in December of 1955. She was not the first woman who was arrested for failing to give up a seat on the bus in Montgomery in 1955. There were 3 others. She's just the most famous. On July 16, 1944, Irene Morgan defied Virginia authorities by refusing to change her seat on a segregated bus in Virginia. She was arrested. She fought the arrest through the court system. Her lawyer was Thurgood Marshall, eventually became a Supreme Court justice. In 1946, she won her case. The Supreme Court ruled bus segregation was illegal, but the decision was never enforced. Parks was an anti-segregationist activist. She was the secretary of the Montgomery NAACP. She attended civil rights training. She tried to raise money for the release of other young black women who had been arrested earlier that year for refusing to give up their seats on the Montgomery buses. Actually, one of the women was not younger than her. One of them was also 42 years old. This is Claudette Colvin. Anybody ever hear of Claudette Colvin? Well, she was the first to be arrested. And she was a high school student. 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin was arrested in Montgomery doing the same thing. The city's black leaders prepared to protest, but they found out she was 15 years old, an unwed mother-to-be, an inappropriate symbol for their cause. On March 2nd, the bus driver ordered her to get up. She refused. She said, "Look, I paid my fare. It's not like I didn't pay my fare. Not a deadbeat. I paid my fare. It's my constitutional right to sit on the bus." And she was right because of the Supreme Court decision in 1946. But 2 police officers put her in handcuffs, arrested her. School books went flying off of her lap. There she is, 15 years old, Claudette Colvin. "All I remember is I was not going to walk off the bus voluntarily," she said after the arrest. She was arrested on several charges, including violating the city's segregation laws, After her minister paid her bail, she went home. But she would not be done with being a civil rights activist. He is very young. That is a 26-year-old Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He is 26 years old. He's little known. Nobody really knows who he is except in Montgomery, Alabama, where he is a pastor at a local church. You know, he's not too far removed from graduating from Boston University, but there he is. The local civil rights campaign was led by a little-known Montgomery pastor by the name of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who I mentioned 2 days ago would have been 96 years old. Colvin believed it was a combination of factors that caused that. Her age, 15, gender, teenage girl, her darker skin color, and the fact that a few months later she'd become pregnant out of wedlock, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King wanted no part of her, absolutely no part of her, didn't serve his needs. That is the Henry Ford Museum. That's my wife on the bus that Rosa Parks was asked to leave, or not leave, but to get up. And it's really odd. It's in the Henry Ford Museum, which is a car museum, which is an Americana museum, and also a civil rights museum, considering Henry Ford was an anti-Semite, probably a racist, and yet the museum is a civil rights shrine, so to speak. And anyway, that's the bus. It's been restored. Claudette Colvin, 15 years old, arrested for violating Alabama segregation laws on March 2nd. Aurelio Browder, age 37, arrested for violating Alabama segregation laws April 19th. Mary Louise Smith, age 42, arrested for violating Alabama segregation laws October 21st. That's Colvin, Rosa Parks, and that is Mary Louise Smith, 3 of the 4 women who were arrested. They were all arrested for the same thing. Give up your seats to a white guy. Nope, wouldn't do it. Rosa Parks is 42, and she refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on December 1st. She was seen as the ideal person to rally around. She was from the working class in Black Montgomery's middle class. She was a leader in the local NAACP. She was a respected pillar in the black community, and there was nothing in her personal life that could be used to shift attention away from the central issue, which was racial segregation. And anyway, she had a seat, and there's my wife, roughly where Rosa Parks was sitting, and told to get up and go stand in the back of that bus. And that is the back of the bus. Again, the bus has been restored. Rosa Parks was going home from work. She was a seamstress at a downtown department store. She was tired all over. I was sitting down, and the bus driver wanted me to stand up and give my seat for a white male passenger. It was custom and it was the law, but I simply couldn't do it. The Parks arrest sparked the Montgomery bus boycott and was one of the major factors in kicking off the civil rights movement. She was fined $10, $118 today, paid $4 in court fees, which would be about $47. The Montgomery bus boycott by the African Americans start on December 5th. Led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he jumps into national prominence as a civil rights leader because of the bus boycott, and the first attempt on his life would come about a month later when his house was firebombed in Montgomery. Vietnam. Anybody go to Vietnam here? Anybody protest the war? Where'd you protest?
One in Vietnam.
Yeah, but where'd you protest? Where'd you go? Where'd you protest?
Where?
Where did you go to protest?
Oh, actually, I went to South Vietnam.
Oh, you did go to South
Yes.
Vietnam. That's interesting. Why'd you go to South
I
Vietnam?
don't know, I went with a group.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she went to South Vietnam and with a group. So anyway, but that's Diem. He's the only guy that's separating communism from South Vietnam. It's 1955. French pulled out of Indochina in 1954. You know, Eisenhower gets this reputation that nothing really happened in the 1950s, whereas a lot of things happened. For instance, in his first year, Eisenhower and the United Kingdom were involved in the overthrow of the government in Iran and installing the Shah because the local government wanted to control their own oil, and Eisenhower and the Brits said, you can't do that. Eisenhower and the Dulles brothers, John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, the CIA Director, Allen Dulles, were involved in the overthrow of the Guatemala government, Arbenz, on behalf of United Fruit and Chiquita Bananas. Arbenz in 1954 wanted to give some land to the peasants so they could grow bananas and sell them, and Chiquita Banana didn't like that. Also, one of the Dulles brothers and Eisenhower were stockholders in United Food, so they took care of that. In 1955, Eisenhower decides it's in America's best interest to back Diem in South Vietnam. South Vietnam must not fall to communism like China and North Korea. And this is only 2 years after the Korean truce, and only 5 years or so after Korea fell, or rather China fell, about 5.5 years. On October 26, Diem proclaims that South Vietnam is now the Republic of Vietnam, and he is the first president. He condemned the northern government, Ho Chi Minh, as authoritarian and blocked the national elections that the 1954 Geneva Accords mandated, making certain that Vietnam was not united under communist rule. November 1st, 1955 is the official start date of the Vietnam War, which was a civil war between the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north and the Republic of Vietnam in the south. There is Ike and there is Diem. That's his guy. This guy is great. Maybe an SOB, but he's our SOB. Eisenhower started to send military advisors, invested huge sums of money in trying to transform South Vietnam into a showcase of the new free Asia. He supported Diem, started to use brutal tactics to suppress his opponents and the majority of people living in South Vietnam who were the Buddhists. Eisenhower wanted to create a pro-American nation in Southeast Asia and halt communism. Now, nobody cared about Vietnam at that time. They were drafting troops to send to Vietnam at that time. In fact, my father was in the army. He thought he was going to go to Vietnam at the time, but they were told, we're not sending troops, only some enlisted people and some military advisors. But they spent a lot of money. Eisenhower thought, the domino theory, the loss of South Vietnam would lead to similar communist victories in neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, such as Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, maybe India, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, and even Australia and New Zealand. And that would cause massive harm to the West. Eisenhower said the possible consequences of the loss are incalculable to the free world. The U.S. would start its commitment to defend South Vietnam in 1955. Warsaw Pact, Soviets are getting worried that West Germany is part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So on May 14th, they formed the Warsaw Pact, and it's Albania, and Poland, and Romania, and Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Bulgaria. They sign on. They're going to defend each other, but the Soviets would be in charge. If any of those countries attacked by the West, the Soviets would lead the attack against the West. The treaty called for the member states to come to the defense of any member attacked by an outside force. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, and there was a much friendlier Middle East to the United States and England in those days, the Baghdad Pact was a defensive organization for promoting political, military, and economic goals founded by Turkey, Iraq, Great Britain, Pakistan, and Iran. Similar to NATO and the Southeast Treaty Organization, the main purpose of the Baghdad Pact was to prevent communist incursion, foster peace in the Middle East, and maybe wipe out Israel if they could get around to it. Eisenhower's health. If you look at Eisenhower here, he looks like a really old man. He's only 65 years old, but he looks a lot older than that. He had pasty skin. I'm telling you this because I'm going to leave it to something else. He had pasty skin. He looked terrible under lights. He had a slight stutter, and he doesn't look very imposing. So he's in Denver, and he gets a heart attack, which would change how medicine reacted to people with heart attacks.
This was the man who
Yeah.
was the general.
General, the D-Day. Yeah, D-Day. Do they? But if you met him, he was less than impressive from what people say. Anyway, it's September 23rd, and Eisenhower was at his in-laws' house in Denver, Colorado. He went to play golf at the Cherry Hills Country Club. He gets pains in his chest and his belly, gets to the hospital, and Dr. Paul Dudley White probably saved his life, and he introduced a new care for heart attack victims. Don't let them lay in bed. Get them out of bed immediately. Get them to exercise. And since 1955, that is the standard care for a heart attack victim. Just happened to be Dwight Eisenhower who had the heart attack, and he ran for another term in 1956 and was healthy enough to stay there until January 20th, 1961. Anybody see Evita? Don't Cry for Me, Argentina?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. I couldn't figure out why would they sing a song about Argentina Turtle. But I was young then. Anyway, that's Juan Perot. 1950, Argentina's post-expansion boom tapered off, and inflation and corruption grew. After being re-elected in 1951, Juan Perot became more conservative and repressive and seized control of the press to control criticism of his regime. In July of 1952, Evita Perón died of cancer, and his popularity among the working classes all of a sudden disappears. He attempts to separate church and state in 1955. In June, church leaders excommunicated him, and they said to the military, hey, why don't you do us a favor? We, the clergy, we're men of the cloth, get rid of them. Overthrow them. And the military listened. Army and Navy revolted. Perón was forced to flee to Paraguay on September 19th. Disneyland. How many of you been to Disneyland? Spent my honeymoon at Disneyland. It's my wife.
bad.
What?
Too bad.
Too bad? Spent one day at Disneyland. It's okay, I got free tickets. I got free tickets, so it's okay. Anyway, so that's my wife in front of the Magic Kingdom back then. Disneyland opened on July 17th. Was shown to the country on the struggling ABC TV network. And there's a reason why it's on ABC. ABC's parent company, Paramount, led by Leonard Goldenson, invested heavily in the building of Disneyland. And the special show was hosted by Art Linkletter. Remember Art Linkletter? Bob Cummings. Remember Bob Cummings? And a guy named Ronnie Reagan. And it was about 45 years ago, around this time, that I interviewed Ronald Reagan for WNEW Radio. Remember
What year was
WNEW?
that?
Excuse me?
What year was that?
1980.
Okay.
This is 55. This is
Yeah.
25 years later, I interviewed Reagan. There was a campaign stop up in Bear Mountain. Now, Bear Mountain, middle of January at night. How many people do you think are showing up at Bear Mountain at the ice rink at night? 6. And then there was me interviewing him. Spent a good time together, a good amount of time together, and I did that for WNEW Radio. Remember WNEW Radio?
Yes.
I was 21 years old when I was working there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they hosted the show. Walt Disney did not like taking his 2 young daughters to amusement parks. He felt they were dirty, and he didn't like people without teeth operating rides. He wanted a clean place where he could take his kid. But he designs Disneyland without a roller coaster. And everybody said, you're not going to be successful running an amusement park without a roller coaster. Well, he went to everybody in Hollywood. He went to Bill Paley at CBS. He went to Sarnoff at NBC. He went to the movie studios. Hey, help me, help me, help me. They said, well, we will. We'll do a show from the place if you ever get it built. Well, nobody was interested except Paramount and ABC. But, all you need is one, right? All you need is one, and he found it, and they found him. The Walt Disney story, that is my wife in front of, I figure, I was looking through old pictures, I'm never going to use this, but yet, there it is, the Walt Disney story. Struggling as a poor third or fourth network, CBS, NBC were 1 and 2, it was ABC and Dumont. Anybody remember the Dumont network, which went out of business September 23rd, 1955? Anyway, Goldenson finds Disney. In 1954, ABC Paramount guaranteed a $4.5 million loan, $52.6 million today for Disneyland. They owned a part of Disneyland. Disneyland, operated some of the food concessions, and they wanted a TV show out of there. Not only did they want one TV show, but they want a second TV show they could use in the afternoons, a show that they could attract kids to, because there was a show that was on NBC that was getting a lot of viewers. Some of you might have even watched it back then. It starred Buffalo Bob Smith and Howdy Doody. Howdy Doody. I know two people who were in the Peanut Gallery. Larry Strickler, who was a child actor on the Milton Berle Show, and Steve North, whose father was a stage manager there. Anybody ever be in the Peanut? Anybody ever been in the Peanut Gallery? And you were on the Howdy Doody show? What was that like?
Supposedly I kicked Clarabelle.
How could
I
you
remember
click
this.
Clara?
He scared me.
He's scared? But he never took off his makeup.
The makeup was scary enough.
You know who the original Clarabelle was? Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo. Captain Kangaroo. Anyway, so there was a request for a second show. And you want to guess what the second show was?
Mickey Mouse Club.
There you go. I'm not a Disney fan, but we went to Disneyland. My wife props that on me. We had only been married 12 days or so at the time. And she takes a picture of me with the mouse ears on. I said, "Don't do that." But she did, so I could use it now. The Mickey Mouse Club. She's 26 years old. Anyway, who's the leader of the club made for you and me? MICKEYMOUSC. Mickey Mouse was a louse. That's why I used to say. Anyway, it was a weekday, daily, hour-long show which featured a cast of kids known as the Mouseketeers. The show presented skits and musical numbers, as well as introducing special guest stars like Donald Duck would walk on, and serials, Disney newsreels from around the world, and plenty of Disney cartoons. The most popular Mouseketeer was Annette Funicello. Can you name any of the others?
No, that's right.
Darla, Tommy, Cubby, Don. Oh well, I did have one woman once name all of them.
Really?
She named all of them. It's about 15 years ago now. The Mickey Mouse Club made ABC profitable, and there was one other afternoon show that really made ABC a lot of money about 2 years down the road. You want to guess that other afternoon ABC show? Dick Clark?
Oh, no.
American Bandstand?
Uh,
Nobody watched American
I
Bandstand?
didn't watch TV.
Oh, you didn't watch TV? Nobody else watched Bandstand? Wow, that's interesting. Anyway, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. That film came out in 1955, produced by Walt Disney. Fess Parker as Davy Crockett. It was a big hit, and it was a fad. Anybody own a coonskin cap? You did.
Say that again.
Coonskin cap. You owned a coonskin cap.
Unfortunately, yes.
Wait, you went to Howdy Doody, you had a coonskin, you had a pretty good childhood. So, anyway, the coonskin cap was a fully lined skull cap with fur, a raccoon tail attached. There was one also marketed to girls called the Polly Crockett hat. Similar in style to the boys' cap, including a long tail. It was made of white fur. At the peak of the fad, there were 5,000 caps made a day. None of you know this guy, but did anybody watch Mad Men? The
Yeah.
series Mad Men, yeah.
Sure.
Don Draper?
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Did you like it?
Yes, unfortunately.
That's him.
That's
Oh, really?
That's Don Draper. His name is Russell Reeves. And my friend Jeff Grimshaw's father worked on Madison Avenue. He was also a madman. And Jeff tells the story publicly, so I can tell it. His mother had an affair with old Russell Reeves, and she was hoping that Reeves would drop his wife and she would become Mrs. Reeves. That never came of anything. I said, "Did you ever get anything out of there?" And Jeff said, "Yeah, I get 2 autograph books from him." But he was the madman. He was the absolute madman. Truth, man, he doesn't get involved with truth. He's only out to sell you something. In 1952, he invented the modern political or presidential campaign. It was totally dishonest. Totally dishonest. He gets the account. He gets Eisenhower's account. And he's looking at Eisenhower. He says, "This guy's pasty. He doesn't speak well. He looks white, you know, you can't do anything with him.
He was very well known, Chevron.
He was, yeah, he was well known, but you try to sell him like you're selling a box of cornflakes. So he brings him to Midtown Manhattan into his studio, and they spend 3 hours there. And Reeves and his people are asking Eisenhower questions, and they said, look that way, don't look at the camera, look that way. Well, what they were doing was they were feeding him questions, and he was giving the answers. Okay, they got all the answers. They go back, they look at the video, and okay, we'll use about 6 or 7 of those answers. Then they go into Rockefeller Plaza, and they interview the tourists. And they say, if you could ask President Eisenhower, or the nominee, Dwight Eisenhower, any questions, what would those questions be? So they're playing Jeopardy. He gives the answers, you have to give the questions. And so you would have these people asking questions, and they were told to look that way, and Eisenhower's looking that way, and they never meet. There's no face-to-face. They splice together the questions that were asked in Rockefeller Plaza and what Eisenhower answered, and that was the first presidential commercial. Totally dishonest, but Russell Reeves never worried about honesty. Did Don Draper worry about honesty in Mad Men?
Oh, he was very happy about it, I know that.
Yeah, honesty, what's that? Anyway, he was a pioneer of television advertising, and he generated millions of dollars for his clients and helped Dwight Eisenhower win the election. His most famous ad, though, was for Anacin. And I love watching this Anacin ad because I watch it every once in a while. You have this woman, and her kids come home, and her kids are driving her crazy. You can see the inside of her head. It says, tension, 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 tension. She's yelling at the kids, and then she takes Anacin. And all of a sudden she takes Addison, and she's cool, calm, and collective, able to give the kids dinner, able to greet the husband at the door. Oh, everything is okay. Even after Russell Reeves hits you over the head with a sledgehammer. Anyway, it was grating, but it tripled Addison's sales. Anybody here eat M&Ms? What is the slogan?
Melt in your hand,
Melts in your mouth, not in your hands. You know who came up with that? Russell Reeves. Russell Reeves. He thought commercials should have one central message: hit the viewers over the head. Hit them over the head. And you know what? It worked until the mid-1960s. How many of you sat around the TV with your family like that? You did? You did? You sat around
My
the TV?
family watched, but I...
You didn't watch.
No.
You didn't watch. You refused. You were the rebel with a cause.
Yes.
Rebel with a cause. Anyway, the rise of American consumerism. Now, you got to remember, in 1955, there was no other country on earth that could equal what America was doing with consumers and products at that time. Japan's rebuilding. Germany is rebuilding. Most of Europe is still a wreck. But the United States economy is humming at a rate that it has never seen before or have seen since. The economy was so good that more women were in the workplace in the mid-1950s than ever before. And teenagers all of a sudden could have part-time jobs, and they could spend money. Families of all income brackets were buying televisions at a rate of $5 million a year. By 1955, companies spent $1 billion, which would be $12 billion today, for TV ads. Companies spent $12.5 million in 1949 for television spots. That would be about $165 million, but there were only about 25 TV stations on in 1945, while there were hundreds on in 1955. But Eisenhower wanted Americans to spend. He wanted Americans to forget about the Depression, that's over about 15 years, forget about World War II, that's over about 10 years, forget about Korea, we got the truce here 2 years ago, go out, have a good time. But the black community was excluded from having a good time with money for the most part. McDonald's, I haven't had McDonald's in about 45 years. And that was a conscious decision. But McDonald's, this is 1948, this is their first McDonald's stand. The McDonald brothers, Richard and Maurice, opened a restaurant on December 12th, 1948 in San Bernardino, California, after they closed their existing restaurant, and they wanted to sell the products that sold most, like hamburgers. First self-serve McDonald's. Sounds like a routine that John Belushi did in the first years of Saturday Night Live. They sold hamburgers, cheeseburgers, french fries, soft drinks, and milkshakes. Hamburgers, cheeseburgers. They did a skit like that, by the way. 1952, they moved to a new building that happened to have golden arches. They didn't come up with the golden arches. The building happened to have golden arches, and they took it. So this guy is a traveling.
Where was the building?
The first one, San Bernardino. Anyway, this guy is running around the country selling this, malted makers. Remember those? Remember those in the stores? In the candy stores, when you want to malted, they give you malted. Anyway, it's 1954. He's selling multi-mixer milkshake machines. Bet you never knew about egg cream. Bet you, how many of you knew about egg creams? 2 cent
The
plain.
best.
Now what?
2 cent plain. And what was an egg cream made of?
Chocolate?
Chocolate and seltzer.
Right.
Oh.
right.
Chocolate and seltzer. That was it. There were no eggs in it.
Milk?
No
And
milk.
egg cream, did
Yeah,
you say?
yeah.
Milk, there wasn't.
Some,
Oh.
yeah, some, but
Yeah.
some not.
Yeah.
So anyway, but there was no eggs in egg cream. 2 cent plain was without milk. Anyway, Kroc noticed there were all these machines, and he says to the McDonald brothers, "Hey, you got to go all over the United States, and I'm the man that could do it for you." And he did. The first McDonald's, April 15th, 1955. That is Des Plaines, Illinois, outside of Chicago, on 400 North Lee Street. That is the first of the Kroc restaurants that opened. How many of you, the men, just the men here, how many of you went to work with a suit and tie?
Went to
Say that
what?
again?
Went to work with a suit and tie? You
With
did.
what?
With a suit and tie. How many men went to work with a suit and tie?
Oh, my
Every-
husband did.
Your husband, why?
He had to be in his office.
But why would he wear a suit and tie?
Why would he wear a tie?
Suit and tie, yeah.
Because he had clients coming in.
Well, this is the whole thing. As somebody said the other day, I have no idea, it was just everybody did the same thing. There is a theory, after World War II, because so many men were in uniform that they adopted the business uniform, which was a suit and a tie. Today, the suit and tie is basically passé.
Ubiquitous.
Yeah. Anyway, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit by Sloan Wilson. Anybody read that book or watch the movie?
No,
Yes.
the movie had
Yeah.
Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck was in that
Remember the
movie.
title?
Yeah, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. There are tracks in the foundation of America. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit was written by Sloan Wilson, and it questions the American lifestyle of the 1950s.
Oh, that's
Tom,
Fox, isn't it?
Gregory Peck.
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Tom and Betsy Rath are a young middle-class couple that share a struggle to find contentment in their hectic and material culture, while several other characters fight the same battle. Tom sees how his boss's marriage and family life have been ruined by overwork, so he turns down a high-pressure job involving travel in order to work hours and spend more time with his family, normal hours. The cracks in the foundation, the rat race. Nobody uses the word rat race anymore, but the rat race. The unpleasant life of people who have jobs that require them to work very hard to compete with others for money, power, status, etc. We've gone back to that. I mean, I've talked to my daughter who was in corporate at Goldman Sachs and Starbucks. Same thing, work 100 hours a week. Average income families in 1955 was $4,400, about $52,000 today. Well, it was 6% higher than 1954, and there was no inflation, so there was more buying power in 1955. Blackboard Jungle. Anybody see the movie Blackboard Jungle or read the book?
I think I saw
So,
it.
yeah, a woman the other day said she went to college, Hunter College, with the guy who wrote Blackboard Jungle. She said he had an Italian last name, and he loved Hunter so much, he took the name to write the book, Evan Hunter. And there's Sidney Poitier. Yeah, Blackboard Jungle is a social drama film about teachers in an interracial inner-city school based on the 1954 novel, The Blackboard Jungle. The movie highlighted violence in urban schools and helped spark a revolution called rock and roll, featuring Bill Haley and his Comets singing Rock Around the Clock. Now tell me how that is a song that was polarizing. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock, rock. I taught my kids how to read a clock with that song. I am teaching my grandkids how to read a clock based on that song. Except it was a scary song back in 1955. The film hit a nerve with a brutal depiction of social conditions in urban schools. Fights and riots broke out in many towns in England where the movie was shown, but in the United States, because the song was played over the opening credits, some kids would dance in the aisle. They liked the song. The film was about juvenile delinquency, which seemed to be a big deal in the mid-1950s, and an unusual amount of black actors for a 1955 film. Sidney Poitier's breakout role and Bill Haley's Rockin' Around the Clock ushered in a frightening era for parents. Rock and roll is here to stay, as Danny and the Juniors sung. Now tell me, that guy, does he look scary? As Bill Haley. Bill Haley was blind in one eye. He had a little curl in front of his head. And does that crowd look scary? It's rock and roll. And there's Bill Haley and his comments. Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock, didn't grab much attention. It was released as the B-side, this other side of 78, 45, in 1954. The scary song was on the A side. It was called 14 Women and One Man. And it was about a nuclear holocaust, and this one man, Bill Haley's character, has to repopulate the earth with the 14 women. Anyway, it was featured in Blackboard Jungle. It was the first rock and roll song to hit the Billboard pop charts and is credited with introducing rock and roll music to mainstream audiences. He is forever 26. He was a heartthrob. Why was he a heartthrob?
He was just perfect.
Why was he perfect?
Yes, when he was younger.
Well, he was young. He only lived
Yes,
to
I know.
26.
That was,
Yeah.
He was so good.
And you were a rebel with a cause.
Yeah.
You didn't watch
I was
TV.
a rebel.
You were a rebel with a
Yes.
cause.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, there he is,
I was
26
passionate,
years old
I was
forever.
older.
Dean was killed when his 550 Spider that he was driving collided with a Ford Tudor
Yeah.
along then US Route 446 near Shalem, California. The Ford was driven by a 23-year-old Cal Poly student, Donald Turnipseed, and was turning at an intersection. The two cars collided head-on, killed Dean instantly, massive damage to his Porsche. The actor died instantly. The passenger with him, Ralph Wuthering, did survive. He was badly injured. He remains forever 26. He's forever 26, and he still makes $3 million a year. When I was at PS 151, Woodside, Queens, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I had to watch these movies. We had to watch them. And one of them was hysterical. Even as an 8-year-old, I knew there was something amiss about this one. It was called Dating Do's and Don'ts. It wasn't really aimed at me, because as a boy, you could get away with anything you wanted. It was aimed at the girls, so you don't get that reputation. Remember Girls with a Reputation? Remember that?
Best.
Yes.
Best.
Yeah, Girls with a Reputation. Well, this movie by Cornet Instructional Films, this one's copyright 1949, tells you what to do and what not to do. It was a leading producer and distributor of many American documentary shorts shown in public schools. I had to sit there and watch it. The company covered a wide range of subjects: zoology, science, geography, history, and math, but it's mostly remembered for its post-World War II social guidance films featuring such topics as dating, family, life, courtesy, citizenship, especially how good girls were expected to behave. Now, one of these, there's these kids just out of high school. They may be going to college, and there's a woman pushing a baby carriage. And they said, oh, that's what happened to her. We wondered what happened to her. She was shunned because she had the kid. But somebody pointed out the other day she didn't abort the kid, so how bad could she be? She kept the kid. There was one on dating. And if you're a guy, how you're supposed to behave, meeting the parents and all that. When you came home after the date, the girl is supposed to be like this. Let him kiss you on the cheek and shake his hand and say, we'll see you tomorrow. Don't go in the back seat of the car. Whatever you do, don't go in the back seat of the car. I worked at a drive-in movie between 1974 and 1976. I can tell you back seat of the car stories. And how we never approached those cars. Never approached them. But they'd all be steamed up, windows shut in the middle of summer. They were the girls with the reputation, I guess. Wop bop a loop bop a wop bomb boom. Tutti frutti, loose booty. Oops, I'm sorry, I gave you the original lyrics. Tutti frutti, oh Rudy. That is Little Richard. Well, it might have been a drum fill that he wanted, or it might have been the way he talked to his boss at the Macon Greyhound station in Georgia, where he worked as a dishwasher. Released on Specially 561, the record entered the Billboard Rhythms and Blues chart at the end of December 1955, rose to number 2, February 1956, but Pat Boone's version did better on the charts. The New York Daily News hated rock and roll because it was the insider of juvenile delinquency. And they said Alan Freed, he was the guy who was the chief offender. Little Richard said they didn't want to put me in the white guy's way. I felt I was pushed into a rhythm and blues corner to keep out of the rockers' way because that's where the money is. When Tutti Frutti came out, they needed a big rock star. Pat Boone. Big rock star? Pat Boone? Yes or no?
No. At that time.
At that, I guess so. And it, with his white shoes. Anyway, they needed a rock star to block out the white homes because I was a hero to white kids. Kids would have Pat Boone on the dresser and me in the drawer because they liked my version better. But the families didn't want me because of the image I was projecting. He was a crushed, dressing, gay guy singing rock and roll, and that was the image. How many of you used Maybelline? I know you didn't use Maybelline. You didn't use Maybelline.
I forget what it was.
Maybelline eyeshadow, right?
Yes.
Mascara. Yeah, mascara. Maybelline. Chuck Berry.
The
Maybelline.
5 and
Why
10.
can't you be true?
Why can't you be true? A St. Louis singer by the name of Chuck Berry ends up in Chicago to cut a song for Leonard and Philip Chess and Chess Records in Chicago. It's called Ida Mae, which might have been based on the song called Ida Red. Leonard Chess liked the song, but thought it might be too similar to Ida Red. What they needed was a new name. But that wasn't that easy to come up with, as the pianist Johnny Johnson said. That was the problem. Nobody could think of the name. We looked up the windowsill, and there was a mascara box up there with the name Maybelline written on it. Leonard Chess said, why don't we name the damn thing Maybelline?
Yes,
And that's the
you're right.
rest of the story. And there is Chuck Berry. Maybelline quickly rose to number 1 on the R&B charts in August. It was number 5 on the pop charts at WINS 1010 Wins New York. Alan Freed, the disc jockey. Remember 1010 Wins New York playing music? Anyway, Alan Freed played the song for 2 straight hours one night. Meanwhile, near Memphis, there was a little-known singer by the name of Elvis Presley who started to include the song in his own performances. And that's Sam Phillips. That's Elvis Presley. And Elvis would have been 90 years old. Can you imagine Elvis at 90?
How about his hips? How old were
Unbelievable.
they?
His hips would also be 90 years old. I don't know how he'd be able. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Somebody, I did that about a year ago, and somebody said, "Don't quit your day job."
Elvis, they called him.
Elvis the Pelvis. Sam Phillips founded Sun Studios in 1950 as a producer at Sun. He became one of the first white Southerners to record the great bluesmen, such as Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King. Sam Phillips was looking for a white guy who could sing like a black guy, and he finds it in Elvis Presley. Elvis was a truck driver, driving for Crown Electric in Memphis, and this is Sam's story.
He was working for Crown Electric. I'd seen the truck go back and forth outside, and I thought, you're sure doing a hell of a lot of business around here. But never stopped anywhere. So Elvis had cased the joint for a long time before he stopped the truck and got out. And there's no telling how many days and nights behind that wheel he was figuring out some way to come in and make a record without saying, Mr. Phillips, would you audition me? So his mother's birthday gave him the opportunity to come in and make a little personal record. Sam and Elvis. As you can tell, they're making money now because their clothes are better. There wasn't anything striking about Elvis except the side group. They were down here, which I kind of thought, well, you know, that's pretty damn cool, man. Ain't nobody got them that damn long. Talked in the studio, played the record back for him in the control room on the little crystal turntable. Walked up front, told Marion, she was the co-owner of the business and the secretary, write down Elvis's name, the number, how we could get a hold of him. Phillips did not want Elvis to be a ballad singer. He put a band together with Scotty Moore on guitar and Bill Black on bass, and eventually the drummer DJ Fontana. I knew he had the fundamentals of what I wanted. He was the first one I had seen who had that potential. He had a different type of voice, and this boy had listened to a lot of different music, from the Grand Ole Opry to Bing Crosby, Dinah Shore, to Crudup, Big Daddy Arthur Crudup, to Bill Monroe, to Hank Snow. And that is Arthur Crudup's That's All Right, which is Elvis's first hit. And for me, that damn thing came through so loud and clear, it was like a big flash of lightning and thunder that follows. I knew it was what I was looking for Elvis. When anybody tells you they got a hit, they don't know what hell they're talking about. But I knew I had it on That's All Right. I just knew I had found the groove, in my opinion. That's all I had to go on, honey. I mean, let the people hear it. I didn't ask them their damn opinion. Grand Ole Opry, that's in Nashville. There were two Grand Ole Opries, Nashville Uptown and the Ryman Auditorium downtown. I saw a show at the Ryman Auditorium. It was great. I didn't expect anything, and I went in there. It was like 5 hours later. This is great, absolutely great. Anyway, from New York to like the Grand Ole Opry, I did. Anyway, it's October 2nd, and Elvis performs at the Grand Ole Opry. Does not go well. One of the Opry people said, go back to driving a truck. Well, Elvis, Scotty, and Bill quit their day jobs in mid-October 1954. They tried out on the Louisiana Hayride. They were successful. It was a show out of Shreveport on KWKH radio. They liked him. They gave him a contract. It was the Grand Ole Opry's competitor, 190 stations in 13 states. And there he is on the Louisiana Hayride radio show. Bill Black's there. So he gets a regular appearance for 52 weeks. He's got a record deal. He's got a radio deal, but he's just regional. He's regional, and his record label isn't that much money. Here's Elvis in 1955, 70. You're an Elvis fan, huh? You liked Elvis?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you like him going around? Yeah, shaking his hips. Anyway, it's November 21st, 1955, and Sam Phillips sold Elvis's contract to RCA Records. I had to look at everything for how I could take a little extra money and get myself out of real money. I mean, I wasn't broke, I was hand to mouth. I made an offer to Tom Parker, but the whole thing is, I made an offer. I didn't think they would even consider $35,000, $404,000 today. Plus, I owed Elvis $45,000, which would be somewhere between $46,000 and $58,000 today. Rock and roll artists had not proven themselves yet. Elvis worked hard, sold some records, but was a mid-level performer on the circuit. Elvis recorded 24 songs at Sun Records. In 2002, all those songs were inducted into the U.S. Congress's National Recording Registry. The start of the Quebec separatist movement. Quebec, the Quebecois, French Canadians, they lost their province to the English back in 1759. Wolfe and his British military defeat Montcalm, Plains of Abraham. Montcalm is killed within 15 minutes, and ever since then, the French were under the thumb of the English. Rocket Richard was the star of stars for the Montreal Canadiens, and he gets involved in a fight in Boston. It's March 13th. The Montreal Canadiens played in Boston. Bruins defenseman Hal Lako high sticks Richard. The Rockets skated over to Lako, hit him in the face and shoulders with a stick. Richard continued to go after Lako, restrained by Cliff Thompson, the linesman. He breaks loose, punched Thompson twice in the face, knocked him out. National Hockey League president is Clarence Campbell. This guy's a tough guy. This guy was a judge of the Nuremberg trials following World War II, so he doesn't take any nonsense if he can do that. He came down hard on Richard, suspending him for the remainder of the season and the playoffs, and that did not sit well with the people in Montreal. If you went to the hockey game on March 17th, a smoke bomb was detonated in the Montreal Forum. It was a showdown game for first place between Detroit and Montreal. Campbell, the tough guy, the Nuremberg judge, told by local politicians don't show up, but he does. Detroit gets off to the lead, then Campbell is hit with eggs and vegetables and garbage. The bomb is detonated. The Forum is evacuated. Detroit gets a forfeit victory. This is what's going on outside the Forum, the riot in Montreal. Outside the Forum, the riot started. All of this startled the Rocket, who really didn't know how well liked he was in the province. He was seen as a hero by French Canadians. Suspension sparked a movement, according to some, because Quebecois stood up to an Englishman, Campbell, with the riot. Richard never saw it that way. The riot occurred along the 7-block length of St. Catherine Street. Overturned cars, smashed windows, shot fired from somewhere, 137 arrests. Eventually, the Quebecois, that was in Montreal in 1955. Eventually, there would be 2 referendums to break away from Canada, and they both failed. And that is what the streets look like after the riot. Richard and I spoke about one day, and he said, I was really surprised to see that. I had to go on the and ask the people who were doing all the damage on the street and to the store to stop. It lasted only one night, but it sparked the movement. How many of you watch Kermit the Frog with your kids or grandkids or great-grandkids on Sesame Street? Kermit. Anyway, Jim Henson introduces the earliest version of Kermit the Frog in the premiere of his puppet show, Sam and Friends, Channel 4, WRC in Washington. January 7th, Marian Anderson is the first African-American singer to perform at the Metropolitan Opera. The transistor radio. How many of you owned the transistor radio?
Well, I heard her.
Oh, you heard? Oh, Marian Anderson. Yeah. Anyway, the transistor radio. Music and information suddenly became portable. No matter how isolated you were, you could hear the news of the world. Still to this day in Los Angeles, with the fires, people are depending on radio to get their information because in some instances, cell phones aren't working. Teenagers could listen to music anywhere they wanted. That included being far away from adults' ears. The transistor radio sparked a musical revolution called rock and roll. Oh, Rochester, the Jack Benny program.
Second one on the right.
This is Dennis Day.
No.
There's Oh, Rochester, Phil Harris, Mary Benny, Jack, Don Wilson, and Bugs Bunny. Or is that Daffy Duck? Or is that Tasmanian Devil? Or is that Yosemite Sam? Is that Porky Pig? He's Mel Blanc. And he was on the show. The Jack Benny Show, or the program, ends after a 23-year run on May 22nd. Radio is leaving serials and comedy shows behind, transforming into a music format, and with rock and roll disc jockey Alan Freed leading the way. Hello, goodbye. We're almost at the end, so I gotta say hello and goodbye. Goodbye to Albert Einstein. He died on April 18th. Goodbye to Sir Alex Fleming, died on March 11th. Fleming discovered penicillin in 1955. Hello to Steve Jobs, who brought you this, and to Bill Gates, who brought you that. My computer over there with Windows. Steve Jobs was born on February 24th, Bill Gates on October 28th. Finally, next year is here. Finally, next year is here. Wait until next year. But next year comes. That's Johnny Padres, Roy Campanella, the Brooklyn Dodgers. The franchise finally wins the World Series. How many of you went to Ebbets Field? How many of you snuck into Ebbets Field? Snuck into it. there was a way to sneak into it. There was a way. All you had to do was go in the right field line. The guy who was a security guard was drunk by the second inning, and he just walked in. Let you in. Anyway, Johnny Padres won a car, 1956 Corvette, for his work in the 1955 World Series, including winning Game 7 over the New York Yankees. Next year is here. But he had an Army stint coming. He had to go away to do his 6 months in the reserve. So there's a big parade on Montague Street. He's got the car, and he heads up to Glens Falls on Route 9 in those days. So he sees his father, and he says, take good care of the car because, you know, I got to go off to do the 6 months. So this is an interview we did in 1988. When I left, I gave it to my father, who traded in for a new Oldsmobile. It's a 1957 Oldsmobile. He traded my 1956 Corvette for a 1957 Oldsmobile. At the time, Padres didn't seem to mind the swap. The Oldsmobile, after all, was a good car. Anybody have an Oldsmobile? Back in it was a good car? Okay.
So.
But he realized that his MVP trophy was valuable, and he could do nothing to get it back. I wish I would have kept that car. It would have been worth something today. Any questions, any comments? It's your turn to talk.
Anybody have